The United States and Canada have shared one of the world's most connected trade partnerships for many years. Goods, services, and raw materials moved easily across their border, supporting jobs and industries in both countries. But this balance was shaken on February 1, 2025, when the U.S. government introduced a broad set of tariffs on Canadian and Mexican imports. Although these tariffs were officially tied to border safety and concerns about drug trafficking, the true motive was economic. The U.S. wanted to pressure Canada's economy by using tough trade rules to force Canada to agree to American demands. The tariffs affected a wide range of Canadian exports, except for oil and energy products, which were hit with lower rates. The message was clear: apply pressure, make Canada bend, and re-establish U.S. control over the trade relationship. Officials in Washington assumed that Canada would eventually give in and come to the table on U.S. terms. But that prediction turned out to be wrong. Instead of yielding, Canada struck back with its own strong economic response, one that not only damaged key U.S. industries but also questioned whether America could still unilaterally set trade rules without facing consequences. Just days after Washington's tariffs went public, Canada introduced a bold retaliation plan, a $155 billion tariff package targeting American exports. Unlike the U.S. approach, which was broad and somewhat unfocused, Canada's response was careful and well-planned. The first stage, worth $30 billion, was rolled out immediately and targeted key American industries that had both economic weight and political sensitivity. A second wave, valued at $125 billion, was set to follow soon after, ensuring that the U.S. would feel steady and growing pressure over time. This Canadian move marked a major shift. The counter-tariffs were aimed at U.S. sectors that were not only vital to the economy, but also politically important for the current administration. Canada wasn't just reacting, it was aiming to create pain in the places where it would matter most. By going after industries with strong political ties and lobbying power, Canada hoped to turn American businesses and workers against their own government's trade policies. Still, even with its strong pushback, Canada couldn't avoid taking a hit from the U.S. tariffs. Experts estimated a $2.1 billion loss to the Canadian economy, especially in industries linked to cross-border supply chains. The auto industry was especially impacted. Car makers struggled with rising costs and supply issues. Agriculture also took a big blow, with exports of grains, meat, and dairy products facing new obstacles. Even the tech sector felt the pressure. Many Canadian tech firms rely on partnerships and investments from the U.S., and now they were dealing with financial challenges as they adapted to a new and harsher trade environment. But the pain wasn't one-sided. The U.S. had not expected Canada's response to be so effective. Yet soon after the counter-tariffs were launched, major American industries began to feel the damage. It became clear that this kind of economic battle would hurt both sides. Many U.S. manufacturers who relied on Canadian raw materials and components suddenly faced higher costs and production slowdowns. One of the hardest-hit areas was U.S. agriculture, a politically sensitive sector. Canadian tariffs on American farm goods like pork, beef, and grain made it harder for U.S. farmers to export. As a result, supply piled up at home, prices dropped, and farmers saw their profits shrink. Meanwhile, the U.S. auto industry, already under pressure from global supply issues, took another hit. Canada's tariffs on American-made vehicles and parts made cars more expensive for Canadian buyers, leading to falling demand. Car companies that used to count on steady exports to Canada now faced lower sales and growing uncertainty about the future. And it wasn't just companies feeling the pinch. Consumers on both sides of the border saw prices climb. As businesses passed higher costs down the chain, grocery bills went up. Everyday goods like clothing, electronics, and home appliances also became more expensive as cross-border trade slowed. In the United States, frustration began to grow. Businesses and workers started waking up to the real price of the trade war. Canada made it clear that its actions weren't just about striking back. They were also about protecting national dignity. Canadian leaders said they had no choice but to act in defense of jobs, industries, and long-term economic health. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau stated, "Canada was open to talks, but not under threat. If the United States wanted to play tough with unfair trade measures, Canada would fight back just as hard." This strong message won support at home and showed the world that Canada wasn't going to be pushed around. As the conflict deepened, more people began to wonder about the long-term effects. Had the United States underestimated Canada's strength? Was this dispute going to permanently damage trade in North America? And most importantly, was the United States now putting its own economic future at risk by trying to dominate an important ally? The backlash was growing, and it was getting harder for Washington to ignore. The original goal had been to gain leverage, but instead, the strategy seemed to be backfiring. Industries were hurting, supply chains were falling apart, and political pressure was building fast. The trade conflict had turned into something much bigger than tariffs. Now, it was about political survival and a possible shift in the balance of power. As Canada kept escalating its response, the impact on the U.S. economy only deepened. The question wasn't if the U.S. would feel the consequences, it was how bad they would be. What had started as a power move had now grown into a conflict that was spinning out of control. The financial losses, disruptions in key industries, and rising political costs made it clear this wasn't going to be an easy battle for either country. And with no deal in sight, the future of U.S.-Canada trade relations looked more uncertain than ever. As this trade war dragged on, it started turning into a broader standoff. Both sides were searching for new ways to gain an edge. While Canada's first actions focused on direct economic retaliation through tariffs, the next phase became more personal, by involving everyday Canadians. One of the most striking moves came when Canada called on its citizens to reduce or completely stop travel to the United States. This wasn't just symbolic, it was a smart economic attack on one of America's most fragile industries, tourism. The U.S. has long been a favorite travel spot for Canadians. Every year, millions cross the border for vacations, shopping, or business. By asking Canadians to stay home or travel elsewhere, Canada hit a major source of U.S. income and took the fight to a whole new level. The impact was swift. Airlines and travel agencies reported a spike in cancellations. Many Canadians began changing their plans, choosing other destinations or staying local. Big U.S. tourist hotspots like Florida, California, New York, and Nevada felt the blow almost right away. Florida was especially affected. In 2023, nearly 40% of all international tourists in Florida were Canadians, and they poured billions into the local economy. With those visitors staying away, hotels, restaurants, and shops saw fewer customers and shrinking revenues. The financial impact added up fast. According to the U.S. Travel Association, even a 10% drop in Canadian visitors could mean more than 2 million fewer trips to the U.S. That would lead to around $2.1 billion in lost income. This wasn't just a theory. Hotel chains, retail stores, and restaurants that depended on Canadian tourists were already seeing lower sales. And the ripple effects extended beyond just tourism. Local businesses that normally thrived on this seasonal spending began to feel the pain too. Resorts, casinos, and entertainment venues among them. The trade war between the United States and Canada escalated after the U.S. imposed tariffs. In response, Canada retaliated with targeted tariffs and urged its citizens to stop traveling to the U.S., especially affecting tourism in cities like Las Vegas, Miami, and Florida. Canadian tourists had been a major source of revenue for the U.S., and their absence caused serious economic losses in tourism-dependent regions. At the same time, Canada promoted domestic travel and shopping to boost its own economy. Provinces like Ontario and British Columbia started reducing U.S. imports and choosing local or European alternatives, even removing American alcoholic drinks from shelves. In the United States, farmers and manufacturers suffered the most. Tariffs on U.S. agriculture products like beef, pork, dairy, and grains made it harder to sell to Canada, creating surpluses, price drops, and financial losses. States like Iowa, Wisconsin, and North Dakota were hit hard. Manufacturing and auto industries faced supply chain disruptions, rising costs, and layoffs. Consumers in the United States began paying more for many goods, from food to electronics. The overall impact was higher prices, job losses, and declining business confidence. Political pressure grew in the U.S., with governors and lawmakers from key states urging the federal government to end the trade war. Many feared long-term economic harm. However, the U.S. government insisted that tariffs were necessary. Meanwhile, Canada stayed firm. It expanded trade with Europe and Asia, reducing its reliance on the United States. Canadian businesses also canceled travel and conferences in the U.S., further hurting the American economy. As the trade war dragged on, public support for tariffs in the United States weakened. The economic pain was becoming too real for farmers, factory workers, and average Americans. Media stories and market uncertainty added to the pressure, as more people started asking, was it really worth it?